Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Love, Sex, and Leadership. My name is Aaron Kleinerman. Very excited to have a dear friend I've known for many years now on this path of conscious leadership and conscious awakening. Her name is Lindsay, the founder of Alive and Awake. And my experience of Lindsay, anytime that we have conversation, communication, I love her gregarious smile and energy that fills up a room. Felt that from the first time we met. There was just this place of aliveness. I remember when we first met, there's so much alive and awake inside, as part of her being. And then as she started to share more, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a mother of 4 children as well." I was like, "Wait, what?" That just totally threw me off. So very, very blessed and grateful to have Lindsay here on the show today. Grateful for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited and honored to be here. I love to play with you. We have so much fun, and we've danced in many different realms and many different capacities, and co-leading at the first event we attended, I think it was A-Fest, where we first met. We played with some yoga, I remember, some acro yoga, and then as friends, you've been doing some amazing coaching work with me and with my partners. So I feel really honored and excited I love your work. I study your work, and I consider you also to be such a dear friend. And I'm super excited to be playing with you here today in this capacity.
Yay. That's one of the things I love about having this podcast show, is being able to have conversations like this and have catch-ups and conversations with humans that I love, and also being able to broadcast that to the world. So thank you for being one of the humans I love in this world.
So fun.
So just to start with, if you were to summarize or share the work that you show up as and do in the world around Alive and Awake, what's the essence of that to someone who's just tuning in, who doesn't know much about you? Like, what is Alive and Awake, and how are you supporting humans on this planet?
Such a great question. And I think that if I were to summarize it, my purpose on this planet is to help people to activate to their highest potential, to navigate on the journey of life, on transformational journey. I really take a stand for transformation. And I do that through many, many, many different modalities. My main trainings that I've done are around coaching, leadership, strategy. I also have a deep immersion in yoga and ancient wisdom traditions. I love adventure sports and travel. So I parenting relationships. So I basically use life as the ecstatic dance to help guide people to their highest selves, stripping away whatever is no longer needed, no longer part, like a snake skin that's just constantly shedding, and really help them to continue to evolve, transform, grow from a place of self-inquiry, from a place of curiosity, ultimately to clear their vessel of their being, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, to be conduits for God. Nothing short of remembering that we are all God in ourselves, witnessing each other and sharing that. And by God, I mean the light universe, however you want to articulate that. So really helping all of ourselves. And I always joke and am honest about the fact that I'm my number one client, always doing my own inner work to stay in that ecstatic dance with life, to continue to evolve, to witness ourselves and each other as manifestations of life itself.
Beautiful. And yeah, I want to highlight that last point, because that's something to me that I really respect and appreciate, not only about you, but about teachers that are not just out there facilitating and teaching, but are also doing the inner work and showing up to meet the uncomfortable edges inside. And I guess in that, where in everything that you presented, where are some of your uncomfortable edges? Where are the places that you're kind of knowing that you're needing to show up to meet yourself more deeply, so that you can be even more of that empty vessel for your client? But where are some of the places of your stickiness or challenge that that you can, in meeting those edges, you can provide more clarity for those who seek your support. But what are some of those edges for you?
I love this question. And this is one of the many reasons I love you so much. I feel like I've spent my entire life on the edge. So this is a very easy question for me to answer.
Yay.
I call it edge play in a different context than how other people do. For me, but it's all the same. For me, alive and awake, the aliveness is in the edge, on the edge of aliveness. It's in the awkwardness. It's in the vulnerability. It's in the shadows. It's in the ecstasy. It's that discomfort is where the growth happens, is where the aliveness, the juice of life. I call it fucking the universe, is really when we are like tapping into that source energy. And I'm voracious in my own journey. I have friends, they call me the cave dweller, because if there's a shadow part in me, and I've worked with you probably enough for you to recognize, I'm diving in head first. I'm like, what is in here? What can we find? And so in the most recent history, and I dance in the darkness, and it's very, you could say it's ironic, but I actually think it's extremely correlated that the people who shine the brightest on the planet are always the ones who have had the courage or the necessity to go the deepest into the darkness. And so I know a lot of people are surprised sometimes when I say that, like, I really spend a lot of time in the darkness, but to me, it's the path to freedom. That is enlightenment. And so to answer your question, one of the biggest pieces that I'm really immersed in right now is relationship work. I just came out of a very long-term marriage and a divorce with 4 kids, and navigating that and all of the triggers that can bring up, which I could be here for 3 weeks telling you about what those are, but I'll keep it short for today. And then entering into a new relationship with a new person who is a divine karmic soulmate with me, and using this new relationship as a place, a conduit, a playground for my own evolution and expansion, and being in a deeply provocative, evocative, sacred contract in a new relationship, and using that as the playground, as the laboratory, I guess you could say, for exploring more and more of my shadow work, is the thing I'm most excited about right now, is the most potent. And of course, that has directly led into the work I do out in the world. And I'm sure you find this, but at every juncture, whenever I peel back another layer of my own development, take another layer of shadows and set them free through compassion and releasing, and all the beautiful work that we all have the privilege as guides and teachers to do on ourselves and with each other. Compassionate inquiry and parts therapy and loads of work that I've done with you, somatic releasing, etc. I automatically start attracting clients who are in exactly the place of needing that type of guidance. It's so magical and epic. I call it next level leadership, because it's just, you don't even have to market yourself. It's like you just step into the next level of who you are. And people, in my experience of over 20 years, 22 years of doing this work, they literally start knocking on my door, and they're going through something that I just had a big process or release like 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever. And I'm like, well, funny you should ask, because I just happen to have a giant toolkit of things that I just had to figure out, because I also just had to navigate that giant, whenever it is shadow or cave or whatever, whether it's divorce or, attachment stuff, you name it. We can go on and on about all the things, the abandonments, all the things that relationships to me are the most potent place to witness ourselves. For me, parenting is a close tie or second, but I think that romantic, intimate, sexual relationships for me are the most potent place if you really want to play full out in terms of expansion and evolution. And when you can master yourself and expand yourself in that realm, for me, it's like easy to translate that into the workplace and out into the world and into business. So the energetics of that work for me, and that's why I love the work you do so much, and why I love to work with you, is so transferable and so activating. For example, the sacred sexuality, the portals that get opened in those realms which is one of the areas also that I'm most like excited about and ecstatic about, to have a partner that I can play in those realms with. So it's not just the shadow work in terms of edge play. It's also like, how good can you take it? How high can you go? How much ecstasy can you experience? And fucking the universe is like, how much can you become that conduit of God? Yes, it's orgasmic in the physical sense, but it's orgasmic in the cosmic sense. And then how do you take those portals and those openings to broaden my capacity to receive guidance, downloads, insights, visions, and energy, which then, to answer your question again, gives me the capacity to serve on the planet at higher and higher levels in terms of magnitude of the people that I'm serving, their level of intensity, power, the numbers of people that I'm capable of engaging with energetically, for example, sizes of audiences, or I'm writing a TV show that I know will be seen by millions of people. I need to have my vessel be at a certain level of capacity. So I can channel the TV show or the creativity or the art or whatever it is, and also be able to energetically hold the attention of potentially millions of people. And so that's why the deep inner work automatically translates out into our creative work out in the world. The capacity we have, I know you and I are very aligned in the intensity of the work we do with clients. I do like very deep, very intense work with clients, and I go places with them that I think most people on the planet wouldn't touch because they themselves are not comfortable in those places. And so for me, the inner work, the edge work is, first of all, I think it's my mission on the planet. I think it's everyone's mission on the planet, whether they know it or not. And then I see it as a great privilege because it creates the space for me to then serve, which I find fun and also part of every person's purpose on the planet, whether they know it or not. It enhances my capacity. It enhances my gifts and my genius and my talents that aren't mine anyways. They're actually just God, the universe, spirit coming through me. So I'm just the vessel, but it's fun to play. It's fun to play in those places, like how creative can we be? How all of it. It's fun.
Yeah, oh, I love it. And what I'm really hearing you share is the depth to which you are diving into your own edges and areas of growth means that in clearing that, you become more empty to allow more life force and channeling and support in the, not only for yourself, but in the frequency and the number of individuals that you can support in their own waking up journey. And in that, it's beautiful, really honoring and celebrating you in that.
Yeah. Thank you. It's kind of a paradox in a way, in the sense that I'm going to speak for myself, but I mean this for all of us, as my capacity to feel, because I'm exploring those edges, so I can go to the depths of despair and rage and, abandonment and awkward and all of those things, and bliss and ecstasy. We actually get a richer range of experience of life. So in that way, it's very full and it's very rich. And at the same time, we're clearing the vessel. So your word of emptying of the samskaras. I'm just starting to study Kabbalah. They call them tikkuns. The stickiness does start to clear. So those things that can make us feel stuck, make us feel dense, make us feel unclear, do start to clear away. And so it's kind of a paradox of being very rich and very full as the emotion flows through, as the life experience flows through. We have the capacity to be fully alive in it. And then we can quite quickly go back to center, be back in the observer space, awake in the journey of it, and available for the next wave of whether it's creative inspiration, human experience that triggers us, whatever it may be, client engagement or conversation that we're co-creating this space with.
Yeah, no, beautiful. I'd love to direct the conversation because I know people who are listening certainly have gone through divorce and separation and the challenges of, having this vision of life, bringing children into the world, and then getting to a point where what I'm hearing you share, and also knowing you personally, there's a difference and a separation of time and energy that's happening with your ex-partner and really the moving forward. And I'd love for you to just share maybe a couple of like the key learnings that you've taken away in that process, especially with the awareness for people who are maybe going through divorce or are trying to co-parent, and the pieces that are the sticky areas that we speak into, and where you could say you could share to support someone who's going through that separation and wants to do it amicably, but also with sovereignty and not losing themselves in it, but really holding their truth. What have been some of the key takeaways or learnings for you in that process?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? My Wi-Fi flicked for a
Yeah,
second
I
there.
got you.
Are we still good on signal?
Yep. I got you.
I'm just going to pause until I can hear you. Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm here. Yep.
Okay. I don't know if that was my Wi-Fi or not, but I'm in the jungle, so you never know. Things are wild over here.
All good. All
It's
good.
getting wild over here. We're hot, sparking up all the hotlines over here in the jungle. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great question about my insights about navigating divorce or separation or completion of a chapter of a relationship. And so I think my biggest takeaway, which is directly aligned with my philosophy of life, is that it's never about the other person. It 100% of the time is about you, about me. And so as you're navigating or any of these transitions and that are innately triggering, innately painful, it's an opportunity, as all of life is, to use in your own spiritual evolution. And this might sound like very unavailable for people who are like very in the guts of the trauma. So I acknowledge that wherever you are also is perfect. So if you're in the like, I hate everyone, deep trauma state, that's perfect. And what I'm saying may sound like like not accessible right now, but as a framework, I have a belief and a mantra that I practice, which is that it's all divine. I have, and this is very linked to the tantric philosophy of that all of life is the yogis with the Nataraja is like, it's the ecstatic dance of life. And so the pain, the rage, the hurt, the jealousy, if we can remove the layer of judgment about it, that I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I don't want to be feeling this way, and try to practice compassion and curiosity of like, it is what it is. Now what? That seeing these navigations, specifically of the most painful things in our lives, as an opportunity for spiritual growth, for your own evolution, can be extremely empowering. And so instead of asking like, why me? Why is this happening? Going into that victim mentality, blaming the other person, it's a far more empowering and ultimately useful inquiry to ask, what am I supposed to be learning from this? What are the blessings in this? Just skip as quickly as possible to the meaning-making process of what am I meant to learn from this? When we have a trigger, that person's pissing me off so badly, I want to like kill them right now, whatever. Take that back within yourself and take it to your own inner work. There's probably some inner child work that needs to be done, some trauma recovery work, engaging deeply in these activating times of life as an opportunity to do like a master's level work on your inner healing, for me is the way to transmute again the darkness of that life experience into the light, to make yourself learn the lessons you didn't, maybe the skills you didn't have, the lessons you didn't have. When we know better, we can do better. Going into those wounding, going into those triggers, instead of just blaming the other person like they're a jerk. And they may be a jerk. I'm not saying they're not a jerk, but it's irrelevant, because A, there's nothing you can do about another person's behavior, especially if you engage at the level of, immaturity or darkness. And so the best practice that I can recommend is to use every trigger as an opportunity to go back within yourself and get curious about where's that trigger coming from? Where's that inner child within me that needs extra love? Where's the belief that I've had created? Where is the imprinting that I had that had me choose that partner in the first place, that had me behave in that way in that relationship? Take 100% radical responsibility for your choices, for your behaviors, for your experience on the situation. And you have a choice in every single moment. This is like so profound and so simple. Many of our great teachers and leaders, from Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Jesus and the Buddhas, like, you can choose love or you can choose fear. And it's very simple. It's every conversation. It's every thought. That's the discipline. And I can say, because I had, over 20-year relationship and marriage, we ended up having we had only one lawyer between two of us for our formal divorce proceedings. And we had 3 different 25-year divorce attorneys say that our divorce was the most amicable divorce they've ever seen in their career. You can navigate very painful situations in nonviolent ways. But that takes an extreme amount of self-mastery. I had like a freaking army of helpers, therapists and coaches, and you were there. And, it's not that you don't need to do it alone. And another thing I would really suggest is that and this is also related not just to my personal experience, but doing over 20 years of work with people. Everybody thinks that if they just get rid of their partner, all their problems are going to be solved. It's like all their fault, or the job, or if I just move to another country. Everybody thinks they can just do hit the easy button, which doesn't seem easy, but it actually is. So my challenge and my invitation is, can you sit in the discomfort of the relationship long enough to do your work and figure out if it actually is dead, or if you're just blaming the other person for a lifetime or many lifetimes of unresolved stuff that's inside of you. And so I personally stayed in my marriage for four extra years, from the moment when I had a realization that it was broken till the moment we kind of officially called it. And I am telling you, there was no stone left unturned. My early childhood stuff, my parents, my this, my that, my trauma, I was like, this is all about me. And if I don't clear myself and heal my own relationship patterns and beliefs, I'm just going to go flip to a new partner and repeat the exact same thing. Or I'll do the exact opposite out of reaction and still end up in a boatload of trouble. So my greatest advice and recommendation, which I never give advice. It's just you do you invitation. But I think it's a great practice to not run for the hills until you feel that you have really exhausted, to the best of your capacity, every opportunity to do your own healing work in the container of a situation. Because I've seen it happen many times. You can actually shift the situation by shifting yourself. Even without even engaging the other person. When you start showing up differently, when you're not triggered all the time, when I'm not projecting all my pain onto the partner, you can actually become a creator of an entirely different reality. And that's the magic that I like to play in my current relationship, is how do I take this, do my inner work, and then flip the frequency and literally start to play with creating the reality that I desire. And that's sort of the mastery level, I think, place to play in these types of conflict type situations. So first, the most basic thing is, number one, is take deep care of yourself. So if you're in it and you're shattered in the fetal position on the bathroom floor, cry your eyes out, be angry, get support, get help, ask to be held and loved by whoever you have in your life. Number one. Number two, I would say, is point that inquiry inwards. What's my work to do in this situation? So that whether you stay in an up-leveled, amazing, different new relationship with the same person, or you do decide to exit, you know that you're coming into whatever your next version of relationship is from an entirely different frequency that benefits from the trauma and the dysfunction of that relationship. And then the third place, I would say, if you're kind of really on a place of wanting to play in mastery, is to start creating your own reality that you desire with how you show up with your frequency. And that's like very mastery level work with how we control our thoughts and our energy and really start to show up in the world as God, as spirit, as the universe, and how do we engage with other humans when we see each other as God, as life itself? It's an entirely different game to play.
Love the clarity of each one of those points. And yeah, I feel the depth of experience and the moments of being on the bathroom floor that you're sharing with that is coming from a
You've been there for some of them.
yes, I've supported you in some of those for
Not
sure.
literally, but on our coaching. Exactly.
And yeah, really what I hear in all of that is recognizing that people have created the exact perfect reality for their growth, evolution, and expansion. And this piece to me is where these three themes of love, sex, and leadership weave themselves together when we're leading from the place of recognizing how we're creating and manifesting your life, when we're loving from the place of recognizing that, okay, I'm loving this person in front of me, even sometimes when it hurts, but I'm holding boundaries to the point of not, indulging in my own self pain, but recognizing that instead of running away from troubles, I want to meet it face on and say, okay, what are you here to show me? How are you providing me with some greater awareness on how I can be a better human on this planet? And that's really how I experience you, and what I'm witnessing and what you're sharing is the resources that people can do to meet divorce and relationship with new eyes, rather than just recreating a new relationship with a same person just with a different name, which is what I see a lot of people end up doing.
Totally. 100%. And thank you for articulating that. I have a core belief as well that our souls literally orchestrate our entire lives for us before we enter into our human bodies. And it's actually, whether you believe in that stuff or not, it doesn't matter. It's a fun thought experiment. Because if you're in any life experience and you're like, I chose this, I orchestrate my soul, my highest self that knows what's best for me, scripted this situation so that I can learn what I need to learn. I can evolve in the way that I need to evolve. It's an entirely different game to play. And I've just started studying Kabbalah. Multiple clients kept talking about this Kabbalah teacher, David Guyam, and I just like went and downloaded his course, and it's like literally on top of mind right now. But they have this expression, which is pause. What a pleasure. And it's such a great mantra. So when you're in the trigger, when you're in the like discomfort, instead of numbing out, distracting, trying to get out of it, pause, feel all of it. What a pleasure. Wow, I get to evolve again. I get to see some new triggers. I get to expand. I get to get a step closer to my highest self by clearing whatever this is. It's such a radically different way to navigate anything in life. It's like, juicy. There's another trigger. There's another thing that I can step into, so that on the other side, I have even greater freedom. And even in extreme situations, like abusive situations, whatever it may be, it's not that the situation itself is innately pleasurable, but it's that you have the opportunity. And if you have the belief that my soul sent this character into my life at exactly this moment so that I can evolve and learn, again, even if it's an overtly, it's their fault situation, you can start to ask yourself, how did I call this in? What did I attract? What are the relationship patterns that I felt were acceptable, that I am tolerating? What am I tolerating? Boundary setting, self-love. When do I need to know how to walk away and become sovereign with love? I can do all of this with love. It doesn't mean I have to stay, and it's a pleasure to be. And also, when we start behaving differently, showing up energetically differently in our power, how does that start to change the way the other person treats us? We teach people how to treat us. And so it's very radical if we take this perspective that our entire life journey is perfectly orchestrated, even in, especially, I call them the Buddhas in disguise, like the real fuckers that like we just really get us. They're like the biggest teachers, the Buddhas in disguise. So it's like, instead of thinking like, this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this, I hate this, I don't like it, just pause. Ooh, what a pleasure. I'm being triggered. I consider myself to be like pretty masterful. I've been doing this work for a long time. And like, this person just like got me like, ooh, okay, good to know. I'm still available to be triggered. Good to know. I still have more work to do.
Absolutely.
Fun. Let's do it.
And I love
Yeah.
the humility and the humbleness that that requires. And this is really the segue into like leadership. I know, you know, in my own experience, when I first was tapping into this field in my early 20s, I in my own world as well, like I felt a lot of times I'd come across people on stage speaking and teaching one thing and then their lives dictating something else very differently. And there's one thing to like know that your life is different, but to be humble enough to know that, wow, there's a little bit of a messiness here. And I have the capacity to hit the what I'll call the sacred pause button, which is a lot of times what I say with couples. It's like the shit's going in, or you're going in for the deep dive. And can I have that like masculine awareness of the witnessing without judgment, even of yourself? And this is, I think, the real masterful, mature place is it's not even the witnessing without judgment in another. It's really like, can I witness myself that just wanted to say that thing to my partner that wanted to rip their head off? Can I witness that part of me and see that it's there and recognize that me hitting the sacred pause button is actually allowing more love to grow, to expand, and to be birthed through this relationship that we're in together. And that's, yeah, I love the pause and where's the pleasure. I really appreciate that what you brought in there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And what you shared too, I think there's nuance to it, because there's a witnessing from the masculine, which is like, oh, interesting, I'm about to lose my mind, I'm about to do something really nasty, pause, and ideally I make a different choice. And then there's a more, I would call it maybe a more feminine encoded compassion that's available, that if I do lose my shit and I do become the crazy person, can I do that and still not judge myself? Can I have self-love, self-compassion, self-forgiveness when I behave in ways that aren't in my highest maturity, et cetera? And that's also, I think, a really important part of the process
Hmm.
of, as we develop self-love and self-compassion and a softness, it automatically extends into our ability to have that same compassion and love and non-judgment and acceptance of others, specifically of our partners.
Yeah.
So I think ideally we catch it before we go for the jugular. But when we don't, there's also, for me, there's a deep practice, and I really work a lot with people. I find that as hard as we can be on our partners, 9 times out of 10 people are infinitely harder on themselves,
Hmm.
which that shame and that self-judgment manifests as greater defensiveness and aggression towards our partners. So
Mm.
that's that practice alone of self-compassion and self-acceptance, even in our ugliest. And that's something you were asking me about my shadows. That's something that I've done a lot of work on in the last decade for sure, is like, can I love myself in this version of me that I would have judged as being horrible,
Mm.
whatever it
Mm.
is, rage, jealousy, dysfunction, toxicity, whatever, name it. It's like the greatest practice that I have been embodying is that, can I love myself in all of these versions of myself? And that is truly liberating. And that single thing has elevated me and freed me. That's not excusing bad behavior. There's a very big difference between loving yourself in your failings. You still need to go and clean up your mess.
Mhm.
You
Mm.
still need to, ideally change your behaviors as you move forward. But the first step is, can I love myself unconditionally, as the universe or God or spirit or whatever would see me. And when we can develop that kind of unconditional love for ourselves, it's the magic elixir to be able to start to operate in that way with our partners, with our children, with our siblings, with our parents, etc.
Mhm.
It's very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things you mentioned earlier around, I know you do a lot of work with people in kind of the corporate world and more of the traditional, you should say, business world that haven't necessarily done as much of the integrative work around sexuality. And, one of the online courses I have is like mastering life from the bedroom to the boardroom. And I'd love to hear like your perspectives with these learnings that you're taking away and you've taken away from the bedroom and how you show up sexually and how that applies to your leadership out in the world on a global scale, and where
Mhm.
some of the the kind of misbelief and the misunderstandings and all the stuff that we push into the closet in behind dark closed doors can actually help to liberate more of the conscious leader inside of us, and where these gaps do you feel like in society the biggest challenges are, as well as what you see where people can start to utilize gifts from the bedroom out into the boardroom? And I would love to hear some of your perspective on this.
Mm-hmm. I am obsessed with this topic and with this practice. I think, like I said, I think it's everything. I think that the magic, that the alchemy that can happen in the bedroom in a conscious, connected, potent relationship will infinitely expand people's capacity as leaders. And I do work with very impactful, high power, whatever you want to call it, on the matrix scale of things, leaders. And these skills are potent. And from the very beginning, one of the core tenets I believe, and this is research, everything I share is 100% backed by research. So it's not just my musings.
Hmm.
I've also been researching it for over 25 years. Authentic leadership is the most effective form of leadership.
Mm.
And that is, with vulnerability, with authenticity. People can sense when somebody's masking, when somebody's putting on a persona. And that's the same as in the bedroom. The more that we can be free to be all of who we are, are asking to have our needs be met, speaking our truth, all of these principles that are really intimate in the bedroom. Also, I would say that probably 60 to 70% of my conversations in kind of with elite senior leaders, like in very, very senior positions, very high positions of power, are mostly about interpersonal relationships and politics in the
Mm.
workplace. And it's shocking to me always that these people can be in such positions of power, but terrified to ask for what they want or to speak their
Mm.
truth or to rock the boat. And so that kind of, and that has many, many layers of work, which can go back down into um, the conversation I had earlier, which is remembering that I have a phrase that I'm employed by spirit, employed by the universe. It can, when we remember that we're just conduits of God, and sacred sexuality is a very potent place to feel those embodied experiences of that connection to God and bliss. And, there are other ways to access it as well, but that's a very potent place that a lot of people can start to really embody that feeling. It really puts like boardroom politics in perspective. And I literally have these conversations with my senior leaders. I'm like, listen, you walk into that boardroom. I don't care if the CEO of the bank is sitting there and the whole board this is what meetings they're walking into. It's like the whole board is sitting there. I'm like, you just remember that you are on a mission from the universe, and what would the universe do? And then it goes back to these principles of like loving kindness, compassion, authenticity. My version of leadership is leading by example. And so the greatest work that I do with people is exactly what we talked about earlier, stripping away the masks, stripping away the limiting beliefs, the personas, the traumas. For example, imposter syndrome, massive, massive, massive topic that I deal with all day, every day with men and women. And again, that's something that I think is very, very potent in the bedroom, of being found out, of masking, of all of these things. And so when we can do the work to become so self-loving and so feeling worthy of being there, it can completely transform the way that people show up in the boardroom, in their negotiations, getting to that state of clarity of my purpose. I know why I'm here. I know why I'm on the planet. I'm having the best time. This is so fun. Doing the work to be present, non-attached to the outcome, because we know that it's like a giant cosmic giggle. there's no one in a more powerful negotiating position than somebody who walks in, speaking on behalf of God, with no attachment to the outcome, there to just love and serve the humans in the room. Watch out. I get goosebumps just talking about it. And, one last thing I'll say, that I do a lot of work with people, specifically around intimacy and self-expression, is I know you do a lot of work around, as I do, integrating the polarities of the masculine and the feminine. That's definitely a huge area that I specifically in corporate settings, because the masculine has been so ingrained, and men and women usually default to being these like hyper masculine. They feel they have to, in order to, and historically they may have arguably had to default into these behaviors. And so starting to expose them, invite them into their feminine, men and women, not just women, in everything from the way that they express themselves, how they dress, maybe being more, I'm saying affectionate, not in an inappropriate way, but more human in the workplace, less robotic, less like this. It's amazing to see how that can shift. I'll give you one quick example. I have a client who I've worked with for many, many years, and she was near the very top of the FBI globally, 25-year career in the FBI, and traveling in the most elite circles in those worlds. And a lot of the work that we did, and she shares publicly, so I'm not sharing anything confidential, was around deconstructing the trauma and the encoding of having to become basically robotic and suppressing everything, as you can imagine, in a 25-year career of that nature. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the work we did was to have her, first of all, rehabilitate and get back, deal with a lot of the trauma imprinting, but then also starting to peel back the layers of this masculine encoding that she, I guess, rightly needed to do to get to that level. Long story short, we did a lot of work in helping her to become back in tune with her feminine, back in tune with, I would call it just being human. When I say feminine, it's more like the Shakti, the emoting, joy, laughter, emotion, versus the masculine, which is sort of more robotic. I'm just using these as archetypes. And so she went, she retired, but she's also being invited back in as sort of a consultant. So she was at another dinner about a year and a half after we started doing this work. And she went in, normally she'd be wearing like a black suit, sitting at the table, worried about what everyone was thinking about her, worrying that the boss was there and this person was there and she shouldn't say anything. And, oh God, what if I sound stupid? Like, this is what people do. Everyone, I'm sure even the CEOs, they're thinking this way. This is what they tell me. This is like true facts. And so she walked in and she was wearing like a gorgeous red dress. She said she sat down and she felt she needed to talk because she wanted to like impress everyone. And she said she just sat back and there were like 8 people and she just listened. And like, again, in that feminine, just receiving, just allowing. And she said about midway through it, she was enjoying herself. She was like watching and listening. She had no narrative in her head of like, I should be sounding smart and I should be, putting a word in. And she said about halfway through, the entire table looked at her and they were all men and they leaned in and they said, what do you think? What are your thoughts? And they invited her to step in. And I get goosebumps because she became infinitely more powerful in her presence, in her being, in her allowing, that the entire table of power brokers invited her. They anointed her as being the leader of that dynamic in that moment. And that's, to me, that is delicious. And that directly we can relate back to the bedroom and really allowing people to be able to dance on the full spectrum of the human experience.
So what I hear there, and I love that you bring this in, is really a deeper form of conscious feminine leadership, one that isn't as much like, I'm here, I'm going to penetrate you, I'm going to force my thoughts and opinions and really drive that. It was like a deeper, let me observe, let me take in, let me see what's arriving and coming in through the communications that are there. Years ago, I had an experience with my past partner, Chantel Raven. I remember, who's an amazing facilitator, and we'd be teaching together. And I was always used to being like the alpha one in the room that would be driving. And that was very much her. It's just like the way that she delivers. So what I had to foster in those years of teaching together, we still do, we'll be in Costa Rica in December, was like this capacity to listen more deeply to the things that were being unsaid in the room, to observe and to take in and to really get a deeper pulse of what was there beyond just my penetrative force. And that was such a priceless learnings during that time. And that's really what I'm hearing what you share as well, is being able to lead from a different directionality than what normally we're used to out in society. And I feel like with our politics, with our economy, with so many different things, like what the world needs more of in the form of leadership is that conscious feminine leadership, and not just in female bodies, but just in the feminine in us all, to birth into a new way of interacting and communicating and creating, power in the world that's beyond just the kind of stereotypical masculine power. So I'd love to hear from you when it comes to that, conscious feminine leadership coming from a female body. And I'm sure at times in your life,
Yeah.
trying to fit into the room and trying to lead from masculine energy, where
Okay.
do you feel you're at with that? And do you think it's possible? Genuinely, do you think it's actually possible on all of these larger scale enterprises and companies and corporations? I love the example you shared, but do you think it's possible that that can actually start, those principles can start to be woven into the work world?
I think it's not only possible, I think it's inevitable. I think it's already happening.
Mm.
I feel very excited about the state of the world. I know everyone else is freaking out, and I'm not. I'm clear that there's a whole shit show going on the planet right now. I told you I'm very, very comfortable in the darkness. This is not new information for me. But I get kind of not even secretly excited, because I'm like, oh, good. The entire system is exploding because it's dysfunctional and it's not working. I'm like, amazing. There's no better place to start than from a giant kind of shattering of pieces on the floor to know that we need to start rebuilding in a different way.
Mhm.
And the geniuses, the thought leaders, the superstars are already on it.
Mhm.
They're already activating. You and I are both traveling in circles where these things are it's already happening. And then there's also a lot of corruption in those spaces as well. So humans are humans wherever we go. I will allude to, I know you and I are here. I'm creating a space here in Costa Rica, specifically a center of excellence for human optimization. I have been working with global leaders for 22 years in Davos and some of the most elite circles on the planet. And I can tell you, they're ready.
Mm.
The world is ready, especially the best and the
Mm.
brightest. And I'm not saying everyone is ready, but I'm saying that tipping point of the number of people that it requires to start to shift the dynamics is happening.
Mhm.
It's already happening. And I'm talking about literally Davos. I was in Davos this year in the most, arguably evil, whatever you want to call it, dark forces are there. But the greater presence that I experienced there was light, love, compassion, curiosity. I spent most of my time there in different circles and communities that were focusing on compassionate leadership with some, different spiritual leaders, different people engaging in human development, human evolution. So it's already happening. And that makes me feel so excited. And so my purpose on the planet forever in the past and even more deeply going forward is to create the spaces, physical spaces in this case in Costa Rica, because all that it takes are guided. And this is something that I've been curating and honing and researching for my entire life. I can, in 1 week's time, help somebody to go from being fully indoctrinated in this armor of the toxic, whatever, patriarchal, blah, 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 the whole thing that we all know, deconstruct them. And this is done not through just talk and intellect and strategy. It's on surfboards, it's in movement, it's in tantric workshops. It depends on the group. It's always something different, but it's an embodied leadership. It's a process that we can put people through, putting them in a community, in a container, in a context. And I know you do this work all day, every day. It's not that hard to help people. People innately want to be in the light.
Mm.
They want to be leading from a place of compassion. That's our natural state. Love, compassion, kindness is our natural state. And what's required is simply to strip away the barriers to that, which are armor, which may be in the form of trauma, programming, not knowing any better. Usually 100% of the time, it involves deep healing work. There's a lot of pain 100% of the time that drives these overtly aggressive behaviors out in the world. And the greater the greed, the greater the destructive forces, the deeper the pain that's driving it, whether it's individually or societally. And so I'm devoting my life into creating this center, is a center of excellence around leadership, specifically with my people, specifically to help to rebalance into that masculine, feminine equilibrium. It's not to trash the masculine. We need the masculine. I actually come from a very masculine encoded background. I had to really do the work to get into my own feminine. So I'm very, very rooted in my feminine now, but it was not my nature. I had a very, very fierce masculine way of being in the world. Having kids helped that. My career shift helped it. Romantic relationships have helped that, et cetera, et cetera. So I see myself as being a bridge between the two. And I think it's necessary. I think that it cannot continue. The matrix, the system cannot continue as it has been. It's a flawed system. And so instead of fighting the old way, I like this philosophy of creating a better system to replace it. And so that's what I'm devoting my life to and my work to, is creating spaces for individuals, leadership teams, groups to come, other teachers, other leaders to come to do their own inner work, so that, like my client and friend I told you about, they can go back into the FBI, go back into politics, go back into all of the academics, tech, whatever it is, acting, Hollywood, whatever, and shift, be the revolution from within, because it's contagious. When you are operating from the light, one person operating in the light can impact millions of people. And we see that all the time, whether it's through performers, through spiritual leaders, whoever it is. All it takes is one person. And that excites me. And so if we just do one person and then one person, and then that person goes out and has millions of people, billions of dollars, whatever it is, the ripple effect, it can happen. And it's once we see the light, once we get transformed, there's no going back. You can't unsee the light. You can't go back to ignorance. It's impossible. You can slip, you can make mistakes, but you can't unsee the light. And so that's why I think the work that you do, the work that I do, that we're all collectively doing, first and foremost on ourselves, we have to lead by example, because I, like you, have seen so many charlatan people on stages talking about how enlightened they are. And then you find one thing out about how they're actually living their lives, and it's disgraceful and it's disheartening. So I humbly offer that I think the number one work anyone should be doing on the planet is on ourselves. And when we get invited to share with others, creating the space for each person to do that work, I think the world is already shifting in that direction. I think it's the momentum can't be stopped. And I think that it's a very extremely exciting time in human history. I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time in human history in terms of the shift of consciousness, of expansion. And as dark as the darkness is as light as the light is going to be bouncing off of that darkness. So it's a constant dance. And if we can use all of this darkness, all of the violence, all of the triggers as opportunities to look back within ourselves, right? There, but for the grace of God go I. How am I just like these people that I'm judging, that I'm blaming, the greedy, the violent, the this. How am I violent in my life? How am I greedy in my life? How am I behaving just like them? Maybe it's not at the scale of what that other group is doing or that other person's doing, but maybe I'm violent in my thoughts. Maybe I'm violent in my words. Maybe I'm greedy and I'm not really being that generous with something that I could be generous with. So whenever we're pointing the finger at them, at the patriarchy, at the this, at that group, at this, whatever, take that as an opportunity to point those other three fingers back at yourself and be like, all right, good to know. There's evil in the world. There's greed. There's violence. I'm going to let that be a giant mirror for the work that I still have to do. And once I'm enlightened, I'm the Buddha, sitting at the top of the mountain, then I'll stop. But until then, I'm like, I got more work to do. So just do your work, focus back on yourself, spend less time judging and worrying about what everyone else is doing, and take all of that trigger, all of that rage, all of that, everything, despair, and focus it, use it as fuel to go back in and evolve yourself. You become kinder, you become more compassionate, you become more generous in every possible way. And if every single person on the planet does that, then it's in no time, it shifts everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your fire and your passion for this. And I love that you are on these places, and I'm looking forward to continuing to support you and so many more in these leadership forums to bring more of that there. I think the last question I want to bring in, and it's more of around a clarity piece for those that are listening, because one of the things I heard you sharing is around, accessing that point of the light. And then I also heard you sharing earlier that you're like, diving and having a relationship with the dark. And to me, these two things, like, I have a felt sense of what these two are, but I think a lot of times this can be misconstrued and misunderstood. And I often think of one of the first books I read on this in this world from Debbie Ford, The Shadow Side of the Light Chasers. And if you haven't read that before, people listening, it's a phenomenal book. And I met her a few years before she passed, and that was a great kind of point in my younger years. But I'd love to hear from you, like, how do you differentiate between these two, the light and the dark, and the plus and minus on both of that in regards to what you're speaking about?
I conceive of it as a spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
not as an either or. I don't see them as being in contrast. I see it one way that I can articulate it as I see it is when I say a spectrum, it's a spectrum of density of energy. I see it all as energy because at its core, this kind of goes back to the allusion I made earlier to the tantric philosophy. I really buy into the fact that every single emotion, state, action is just energy. And that's just scientifically proven. That's not me making that up, right? It's electromagnetic frequency. They can actually measure with electromagnetic frequency gauges despair, jealousy, anger, rage, joy, bliss. They can allocate love. They can allocate electromagnetic frequencies to different emotional states. This is like really exciting. And so when I think of the dark and the light, I don't think of it as like, oh, one's good and one's bad. I think they're both perfect. I said it's all divine. It's literally all divine. It's all divine energy. It's Shakti. It's life force energy, prana, chi, whatever words you use to describe it, nature. It's just life force energy moving through in different frequencies of waves. And so if we talk about the darkness, for me, that would be what I would call more dense emotions. And there are emotional scales. I know I listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks. They have an emotional scale of, despair, depression at the very bottom in terms of the heaviness of it, all the way up through anger, jealousy, neutrality, optimism, all the way up into joy, passion, love, bliss. And so laying that onto kind of scientific research, to me, light and dark is simply, are you in a higher frequency state or are you in a lower frequency state? Are you in a dense set of emotions or behaviors, which would be anger, rage, despair, etc., or are you operating literally in the light in terms of it's not dark and dense? So that's how I conceive of it. I don't see one as being good or bad. I think that I really buy into the belief, and this is more of a Buddhist approach, that there's as much light in the darkness as there is darkness in the light. So every single, again, human experience, emotion, etc., for me is deeply encoded with all of it. And so I see everything as just a variation of, or a flavor of life force energy. And so the shame, the rage, the violence is one flavor. It's like one part of the human experience that every one of us has the capacity for, whether we admit it or not. And that's why the shadow work is so important, because as you know, if we suppress, it's a whole other reactive thing that can happen. And likewise, the light is simply getting more in tune with the natural frequency of life, force, energy, God, spirit, the universe, which is, as I understand it, around the emotions of things like gratitude, joy, love, passion. And so, for example, rage is not bad, because if you compare it to the frequency of like depression and despair, is actually a higher frequency emotion. It's just, where are you at any given moment? Where are you collectively as a society normalizing along the spectrum of, or the set point of different kind of gradients of the human experience?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we have war or, you know, any kind of violence or abuse, that's like a very dense, dark set of drivers of those actions and behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of them we've already alluded to. When we're in a higher state of consciousness, of being, of creativity is activated at the higher states of, you know, of clarity. That's how I conceive of it. And that's why when I say it's all divine, it's like, I'm not better when I'm in the light than someone who's in the darkness. I'm just at a different frequency at this moment in my life. Maybe I haven't had the same life experiences as them. Maybe I'm going through a divorce and I'm in a really dark place and they're not. It's like, they're not better than me because they're in the light. I'm not bad because I'm in like jealous rage today. It's just like an experience that I'm having. And so for me, the game is more about, I think it's a giant, for me, game of like, can we have the capacity to experience the full spectrum of human experiences, ultimately with non-attachment and self-love? Can I be a jealous, raging lunatic and still love myself in that place, and therefore have the capacity when I see someone else being a crazy, jealous lunatic to not judge them and to offer them loving kindness and compassion, which may involve setting loving boundaries and loving limits. It's not to say you have to hang out with people who are being violent, but it's removing the separation and removing the judgment and the co-violence to go and want to attack them for being where they are. So that's how I conceive of it. And I don't even like the concept like, oh, I'm a light worker and then they're evil and they're dark forces on the planet. We're all light workers and we're all dark forces on the planet, every single one of us. And the sooner that we can own that, and that's the beginning of self-mastery, because if I'm not even aware that I'm being driven by all these forces, there's no way that I can start to transmute patterns and behaviors and experiences of pain or darkness or violence. There's no way that I can start to transmute those back into neutrality or ultimately back into unconditional love for myself or others. So it's just a game of curiosity, of self-inquiry, like ultimately self-compassion, which will automatically lead. You don't even need to worry about how you treat other people. If you're treating yourself with deep love and deep compassion, you can't help but pour that out into the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I love your clarity in that. And thank you for how you show up in the world and the lives that you impact, and the fact that you're both a strong business owner and a mother. It's, I know, very inspiring to many of the people that you meet along the way. Um, if someone wants to find out more about you, where would be the best place to send them?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have, my website is aliveandawake.com, and I'm on Instagram at Lindsay Alive. Lindsay with an AY, Alive is my most active Instagram, and I would love to hear from you. And I'm super, super grateful to have this time with you, and so excited to have had this conversation, and so many more to come, to be continued. And thank you for the work you do in the world, in my life, and with everybody that you're impacting. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for our connection.
Oh, thank you, and yeah, see you soon. Probably a new Sarah as well. I'll be in Costa Rica in a few weeks. Very exciting. Thank you, Lindsay, and
I can't wait. We'll see you then.
absolutely. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining Love, Sex, and Leadership, and see you next time. Bye now.